all nothing. It's random, and it's actually blind. That we used to believe when I was growing up. Roger and I, we come from another generation, but we were told, and I was raised evolutionist. I mean, I didn't know about creation until I read a Bible for the first time at the age of 25. But anyways, it was that, there's these slimy creatures, and then they have a mutation, and it benefits them. So now they just that becomes the dominant gene. Well, that's not it at all. We now know, I think it's UC Berkeley has hundreds of pages. If you're looking to see what evolution's all about, it's called An Intro to Evolution, and they do a great job saying mutations do not benefit. They're completely random. And plus, the mutation has to be in the reproductive cells, or it's pointless. You can have an apple with a mutation, and half of it's green, half of it's yellow, but that's not going to be passed on to the next generation. So not only do you have a mutation that's beneficial, but it has to be able to be passed on to the next generation. No, but I'm glad you brought that up. Okay, when our kids get out in the world, or Roger and I have spoken in different... Oh, the question is adaptation versus mutation. So when we have gone to a lot of churches, different states, we've gone as far north as Minnesota, as far south as California, as far east as Kansas, Nebraska. So we talk to a lot of grandmas and parents, and they're like, oh my word, my kid's an evolutionist. And if evolution is true, the Bible cannot be true, because they really are opposite. So here's what it is, and this is why we need to teach our kids about evolution within the context of, this is an opposing theory, let's compare it to creation. Because when they get out there, this is what they hear. Well, we know evolution is true because it's happening all around us. What they're saying is evolution is true as in monkey to man, because we see adaptation all around us. Completely different. Adaptation is already in the genes. Evolution has to be a change in the DNA that is in the reproductive cells that's passed on and becomes a dominant gene. And this morning in the math, we learned that an atheist geneticist, so he's a genetic specialist from the UK, he came up with the formula of before a gene becomes dominant in a generation, how many genetic deaths, like how many genes are, wrong. And it ended up, for his formula to be true, we would have had to have 150 billion cave people on Earth. And they're like, well, where's all the fossils? Where's the pottery? And we're not even up to 8 billion on our planet today. So see, it shows it didn't happen. But yes, adaptation that's why even Doug Batchelor calls it microevolution. He shouldn't. He should call it adaptation. You can't call it anything to do with evolution. That's a change in the DNA. Adaptation, it's already in the DNA, and God put it there for the animal to adapt to changing circumstances, changing environments. Okay? No. Yeah. Well, do you want to see Big Bang? I've got the Big Bang explains all that too. I mean, we can either do Big Bang or black holes. Which one? Oh, you're looking at 2 hours. I'm okay. I don't know, but you guys are sitting. Was it the mind can only absorb what the seat can endure? So let me know. Okay, so here's that Dr. Scott Turner wrote this book. He's saying why Darwinism has failed. Now here's an atheist and a philosopher, Thomas Nagel. This is what it came out years ago. It says, Mind and Cosmos, why the materialist neo-Darwinian. Now, neo-Darwinism is headed by Richard Dawkins. That's a completely different thing than Darwin's evolution and today's evolution. It's very different. Oh, it's a survival of the... Okay, so... Survival of the fittest, exactly. He believed that if something mutated in an animal and became dominant and it benefited the species, then that would become the dominant species. And he used the finches in the Galapagos Islands. Well, and of course he noticed the beaks, some of them were larger. So the ones with the bigger beaks, wow, I see more of them. They must be the dominant species because they can crack those seeds. Well, it turns out we now know the beaks swell during the season. They go back to normal. So his whole theory... Exactly, because science was very limited back then. He's on a boat going around, and that's what he saw at that time frame. He didn't live there for years to see, oh, wait, and when they have a drought, the beaks change. So there's adaptation was happening, and he thought it was evolution. Yes, and he actually copied His evolution, his book was copied from, there was another guy there writing similar thing. Yeah, there's a whole scandal there. And I think it was his brother, his dad, one of them was into eugenics, killing, the old and the weak. Yeah, it was not good. So, okay. So here, this atheist philosopher said why the materialist neo-Darwinian conception of nature is almost certainly false. He was so attacked by his fellow atheists. Like, what? And on the other side, the Christians who he's never had to do with, welcome! We've been saying this forever. We love you. And he's like, what an odd place I find myself in, right? He was so shocked because he said he wrote it because evolution has not been able to answer the questions. As we've become to see, now we can see atoms. We saw pictures of those earlier today. Because our technology has so improved and we're seeing things now, the big thing is molecular machines, DNA, and the fine-tuned universe. Those are the three big ones for creation. We now, there's more evidence for creation than evolution. This is the first time that has been. So, and so he said he wrote this to shake them up and say, look, you got to have better answers in evolution. It's not answering the questions. So then, the Royal Society of London, I was just telling the young man back there at the AV, the Royal Society of London, if you are the top of your field, if you're a great physicist or, probably Dawkins, you will be a member of this. These people they're very accomplished scientists in their field. And this is the oldest academy of sciences that it's never stopped existing. It's never closed down. Okay, in November 2016, they had an unexpected or unscheduled meeting because of what we're talking about. Evolution is not answering the questions when it gets down to the molecular level. So they had them get together, and you can go on their website and see what they came up with. Like, okay, so here's what we can say. Within the context of evolution, here's what we think happened, why this happened. Because DNA has it has a predefined code. So how do you have a code that's already set when that DNA is unraveling and it's made copies? There's something, the code is already there. Well, if you didn't have a mind to do the original code, it's not random. The code is already there. So anyways, that's what they did. And here it is. Developments in evolutionary biology and adjacent fields have produced calls for revision of the standard theory of evolution. They're calling for it to be revised. And here's what's so interesting. We have got creationists moving towards evolution, and the evolutionists are taking a step back going, wait, we got to fix something here. Isn't that sad? All right, so here's Dawkins, and he's going to tell you what evolution does not answer. Oh, whip. Yeah, right here. Oh. Oh. Oh, here. Oh, what about this? Here. Can you hear it? Okay. Well, what he's saying there, let me shut him off. Yeah, we watch a lot of debates. But anyways, if you can see he's talking with John Lennox. John Lennox is incredible. He grew up in Northern Ireland. Of course, there's horrible prejudice there, Catholics versus Protestants. And his parents were nonpartisan. And so they hired everything. They hired both Catholics and Protestants to work in their store. Well, his brother was working there when somebody threw a bomb through the front window and glass shattered and cut up his face. He said, but my brother never questioned why God allowed that. He said, he's just a strong Christian today as ever. So he said, so he grew up with that. Anyway, so he's also a professor of mathematics at Oxford, and Dawkins was a professor there too. So they had a very friendly and very polite, that's how British debates happen. They're very, unlike in America where they're yelling at each other and you don't know what they're saying. But in England, you can actually hear the conversation. So anyways, he questioned Dawkins, and he said, and so he says, well, evolution does not explain the cosmos. And Dawkins said, you're right. The cosmos is still waiting for its Darwin. Okay, so he admits the cosmos, we don't understand it. Okay, laws of physics. He says, yes, we don't understand how the laws of physics came to be, because again, that would require a mind putting those together. And then he said the physical constants, that's a charge of an electron, gravity, energy, light, speed of light, and then the origin of life. So none of those, Dawkins is agreeing with Dr. Lennox that evolution doesn't explain any of those. So my question to you is, what's left? What does it explain? That's everything right up there. The universe, life, physical constants, laws of physics are everything. Oh, yeah, I know. But I'm saying evolution doesn't explain any of these natural methods. What does it explain? And so the only thing it does is once life came up out of the mud or whatever, then they believe things started evolving. That's it. But if there's no origin of life, how do you even get to that next step? Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, so we're going to do, for the family just walked in, we had a vote. If you would like to join the vote. Big Bang or black holes? Because black holes, Scripture tells us that there are no such things as black holes. And it's interesting. Here, let me show you something. Oh. Yeah. So here's what it is. Yeah, here it is. This is the Big Bang. So, yeah, no, we'll go to the black holes. So in 1933, George Lemaitre is a Jesuit priest, astronomer, and physics professor. So that's quite a lot of degrees, back in that time. And he's a Jesuit priest. He theorized the universe originated as a great cosmic egg, expanding outward from a primeval atom. He just said it was just a big explosion. So, of course, our question is, so all the elements for a universe are in that atom, so who put that there? Like, who filled the atom with all the elements for a universe? But he doesn't answer that. Obviously, it was 1933. Okay, so then there's all sorts of problems. Where did the original matter and energy come from that explode into an entire universe? Matter propelled from a central point. If you had four brothers like me, they were always blowing things up. And so whenever we blow things up, all the matter goes out. In our space, they're going around each other. We have orbiting, we have planets, stars that go around each other, solar system. So how did that happen? Galaxies would not draw close enough to interact if they were flung apart by the Big Bang. Everything should be going apart. This is a big one. Great chains of galaxies could not have formed within the Big Bang's time frame of 13.7 billion years because there's a constant temperature of 2.7 Kelvin above zero across the universe, and the time frame is wrong. Because we see it expanding. So we're saying if it's expanding then as it did now, so what they've had to put in is there must have been an acceleration to account for that. They're always adjusting. So here we've got the opposite. Jesus Christ, high priest and creator of astronomy and physics, claimed the universe originated with him when the Father said, let there be, and kaboom, Jesus just made it happen, and there were no problems. So cosmologists can only project 0.01 seconds after the Big Bang's explosion about what might have happened. Adam actually observed the new world 0.01 seconds after he was created. No projecting necessary. Per NASA's website, now even NASA questions it. They said the evidence isn't there. See, that's the thing is when you hear it, there's people that get their information, I'm assuming from Facebook, right? A lot of people get their information from social media. I have no idea why. But I go to NASA, and there's one called Space in Motion. And Space in Motion are scientists that are not, they don't represent any kind of Christian denomination, but they said there's no evidence for the Big Bang. There's no evidence for black holes. It's interesting. The non-believers are saying it's not there. Now, Scripture does say that there's no black holes. So, anyways, so do we want to keep doing this then? Here, let me get here, we'll just do this. Yeah, because then you'll understand it. But I can skip, and then once we do the week, I can skip to black holes. Because black holes is the only evolutionary thing that both sides believe. Now, why is that? Because natural selection is the evolution of life on planet Earth, and the Big Bang is evolution of the universe, and black holes are the evolution of stars. So why do we have that piece on the Christian side, the creation side? Yes, and it implodes and it just starts destroying everything around it. It's sucking in the other stars around it. They say that every galaxy has a black hole, and it's going to destroy. That's how everything's going to end. In fact, I quote let's see. There's you can go to college and get a degree on how the world's going to end. What a depressing subject. Gosh, I graduated with that. So here's per NASA's website, Universe 101. The following two ideas form the entire basis for the Big Bang cosmology. I love Einstein. He was Jewish, and he respected religion. He said it plays a part. He had a belief in God, but more kind of a distant God, not a personal God. But he always said it like it is. So gravity is a distortion of space-time. And so that has to do, that's a whole other thing. So gravity, we don't know what it is. We only know what it does. Just like consciousness, the mind. A doctor can open up your skull and they won't see your mind, they'll see your brain. So where's the mind? We don't understand that. Energy, we know what it does, we don't know what it is. Okay, so gravity, they believe, is a distortion of space-time. And the other one is matter and radiation are uniformly distributed throughout the universe. Now, you can see it's not. See, the Big Bang, everything should be uniformly distributed, okay? There should be equal amounts of galaxies, right? Because it all went out, so there should be blobs. Instead, it's clusters. There's clusters of galaxies, like those chains of galaxies, and then there's nothing. You can't see anything for a long time. So the supernatural, the definition of supernatural is a manifestation or event attributed to some force beyond scientific understanding by the laws of nature. So here, that's the definition of supernatural. So here I'm going to read to you from science. Here's NASA, and it sounds like it's supernatural. It says, while this, meaning the Big Bang, can account for the existence of the cosmic microwave background. That's a glow out there they believe is from the Big Bang, whereas the other people say it's just the glow of galaxies and stars. That's what it's from. But anyways, they believe it explains it. And it can explain the origin of the light elements, which is helium, hydrogen. It does not explain the existence of galaxies in large-scale structure. So they're saying the Big Bang doesn't explain anything big. And there's a lot of big stuff out there. It doesn't explain it. So this is NASA saying this. He's an astrophysicist, Rocky. He says, as to what drove inflation, nobody knows. All the theories of inflation, and inflation is that the Big Bang had to have this, go really fast in order to have that temperature be uniform across the universe. He says all our theories of inflation amount to proof that we don't have one good theory yet. The public isn't hearing this, are they? You have to go to these sources to find this. Okay, here, I love this guy. Now he's it's a Greek name. Anyways, I always have trouble. Astrophysicist, okay, he said the scalar field permeates all of space, is responsible for causing space to expand faster than the speed of light. He said, that's why I call it a cartoon of a theory. How can natural laws break their own laws? How can light go faster than its law of its speed? He's saying we don't understand how inflation works in any fundamental sense. These are respected, accomplished scientists saying, we really don't know. But that's not what we hear. We hear, oh, this is for sure. Per God's website, Universe 101, the following two statements form the entire basis for creation. For he spoke and it was done, he commanded and it stood fast. And there were no cartoon theories, no problems. So here's the Big Bang expansion. We now know as of 2013 the universe is flat with only a 0.4% margin of error, but let's look what NASA says. A universe as flat as we see today would require extreme fine-tuning of conditions in the past, which would be an unbelievable coincidence. They said it's not even believable. It would require such perfection. And so that's where you get into have you heard of the multiverse? So our universe, so black holes lead into a white hole, and there's a universe coming out of that. So we have all these multiverses, and they say that because if we had hundreds of universes, then one of them would get it right. One of them would get fine-tuned so we could have life in that one. Because to have one universe with a planet with life, like that's just, I can't. So if we had lots of them, then there's odds. We're playing the odds game. That's the multiverse. That's why it was brought in there. So here's the problem. As our flat universe expands with increasing speed, a big rip will occur. Again, this is also depressing, causing everything to be torn apart. And I don't know if you can see, but 60 million years before the big rip, our galaxy is destroyed. Well, our solar system is a part of the galaxy going around it. So apparently, the Milky Way, when it's destroyed, we keep going. I have no idea how. And then 3 months before the big rip, our solar system breaks apart. But look at this. Earth apparently all by itself. Now there's no galaxy, there's no sun, And we just keep going, and then 30 minutes before the big rip, finally we explode. But we were going by ourselves for a while. Well, that doesn't even make sense. Okay, God's expansion, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them out like a tent to dwell in. My hand stretched out the heavens. And there are no rips in God's curtains. There's not going to be a big rip. Okay, so here's the Big Bang. The sun formed, cooled, raw material was flung off and revolved around it, forming this protoplanetary disk. So you've got this star cooling, and you see all this debris going around it. And in that disk, there's rocks crashing into each other. And they're saying the grains settled together and collected into clumps, then chunks, and finally bodies large enough to exert their own gravity. And notice you've got this perfect sphere, which is smooth, and you've got this thing over here looking more like an asteroid. So they're saying that the asteroid eventually became smooth. But is there friction in space? How does it get smoothed out? And then two of the chunks collided, and what remained became our moon. It also looks like the largest bowling pin, right? So problems. Each planet is different in composition. If they form from the same material, we'd expect them to be of the same substance. If really our sun was a star cooling, flinging off debris, all our planets should be made from the same thing, and they're not. I have a separate solar system presentation, but here you go. Each planet's tilt is different. If they form from the same disk revolving around the sun, we'd expect their polar tilts to be the same. Dust in space does not become solid bodies. Saturn's rings prove this. Each planet's moon is drastically different. Even the moons are made from different material than the planets. Earth's own moon is far too large to be the result of a collision, and there's no geological evidence for such an enormous event. So here's the bigger problem. Jeremy, maybe I have to pronounce Sue or Husu, he's got his PhD. He said, now that gas giants have been discovered orbiting their stars more closely than Mercury, so exoplanets have really told us a lot about our solar system. And we are way more unique. It turns out these exoplanets, and we're seeing them now. At first, we would just see a little wobble in the star, but now we can actually see them. And we realize none of them look like our solar system. And so this astronomy student at the U of W, he gave me permission to use it, but he actually, over weeks, and apparently had a lot of extra time on his hand, but he put together, I think, 72 of the stars that now have exoplanets around them, showing their systems, and then he had our solar system as the example, the comparison. And none of them are like ours. So our solar system is completely unique, and planet Earth is completely unique. Yeah. So here's, so this Jeremy, he said he's been looking at the gas giants, and because of that, he says with 3D modeling, it's Joe Barranco. He's shown for the first time that turbulence would prevent the dust from settling into the dense disk necessary for the instability. There's this whole theory about to make a gas giant, there has to be instability so it collapses on this tiny little core. And he's saying the turbulence from this cooling sun would prevent that. So in other words, we should have no gas giants. He said so here's astrobio.net. They interviewed him. They said these results defy the proposed solution of how planets are formed. And there's actually a whole new theory on how planets are formed because of this, because planets aren't where they should be. And it's called the grand tack theory. And it's even more bizarre than this one about the cooling sun, and at least you can picture that. This other one is the planets are ricocheting. Jupiter's the one, basically, it's picture a pool table, and you're hitting balls and they're hitting you. Okay, that's Jupiter. It's hitting these other planets, and that's why Uranus and Neptune are so far out, because Jupiter flung them out there. And then Mars, what happened to little Mars? Why is it so little? And it's, yeah. So here's creation. Earth was formed first, and the sun and moon were made as lights for the Earth. And there were no flying chunks, no giant bowling pins, no problems. Okay, here's the computer simulation. So our moon has 30 extra miles of crust on the far side of our moon. And so the theory is that there was a smaller moon that collided with our larger moon, and it caused a pie-in-the-face effect. And they named their theory the Big Splat, because apparently they have no creative naming people available to come up with better names. The Big Splat. Okay, so here it is. So you see on the top left, here's our moon, just being its moon, and then this little one comes flying out of nowhere, lands on it, explodes on it, and adds 30 extra miles of crust on that one side, like Jell-O, kind of went. So now this guy, This is a lunar specialist. Oh, there it is, Paul Sputus. He's, I think, a believer. And he said, he's a lunar specialist. That's all he does is study the moon. All of the models proposed to date have a Deus Ex Machina flavor, which means divine intervention. Something changed. They needed divine intervention because naturally it would not make sense. And he says, but science does not incorporate miracles into its explanations. So why are the near and far sides of the moon so different? We don't know. And Dawkins said, when you bring God into science, then you stunt finding knowledge. But here, God's taken out of it, and they're stunted because they're at, we don't know. That's what stunts it. So here's 4004 BC, using real non-simulated activity. The chief scientist created one moon to orbit Earth in a synchronized manner every 29.5 days. He made one side more mountainous, perhaps because it stabilized the moon's speed or tilt or rotation, or maybe he just liked how it looked. He named his creation the Lesser Light. So, you know, and there were no splats from hurling pies. I had to put that in there. All right, so here's now we get into the life systems. There's a tetrapod. They believe it eventually, Darwin's tree of life has these little branches, and we're on the branch of frogs, believing that, yeah, we came from frogs. Frogs evolved into us. What's happened, and I can keep going if you want, but they've actually, now that we've done the genome, you know, the genetic genome of humans, they're now doing the genomes for everything, plants, insects, frogs, and they said it's telling a completely different story. So again, that's why they're meeting with, hey, evolution's in trouble. So here you have the tetrapod that they believe came out of the water. Of course, we have mud skippers that still come out of the water today, and they haven't evolved. And then we got the chimp looking like he's got more on it. You know, he's thinking more smart than the Neanderthal guy who's trying to figure out what to do with these two rocks. What's funny is behind the Neanderthal, his neighbors have torches. So they have figured out how to make fire, but he hasn't. They haven't told him yet. So it's just, yeah, how we imagine early man. And of course, we know they were using iron and bronze, and yeah, they had cities. Okay, there's no evidence of life emerging from non-living chemicals. There's none. The fossil record does not contain one undisputed transitional fossil. So they believe, like, this is in the Midwest, they all love this jackalope. It's a jackrabbit with the antlers. In fact, when you're in Wyoming, there's a giant statue of it along the freeway. So I always tell people, if you're from the Midwest, I have bad news for you. There's no evidence that this happened. And then here's mutations have not been proven to be beneficial. And this is that UC Berkeley. This is their evolution page, and this is the one that does a really good job of explaining what you're saying, mutations. I would go to their page and just look up mutations, because this is what they show. Mutations have not been proven to be beneficial. So not only is it they're random, but they're saying we can't even find one that's beneficial. So that's what evolution's based on, is it benefits the species and they become stronger. Or if they're a lizard and they got feathers coming out of their armpits, now they can fly. You know, it's always something that benefits species, and they're saying, we haven't found one to be beneficial. So I appreciate their honesty. It says mutations are random, not directed to benefit a species. And this is the example they give is there's a fly, and then they have the Hox gene is where the antenna coming out of the fly's face becomes its legs. So it has legs coming out of its head. So mutations are essential to evolution. So there's the whole thing. If you don't have the mutations doing what you say they do, then you have no evolution. The theory is gone. Mutations are the basis for evolution. It says they are the raw material of genetic variation. Without mutation, evolution could not occur. That's pretty strong. So here the only two things they say with evolution is drug-resistant bacteria and insects that resist the bug spray. So here's what they found out. So let's say these are 4 cockroaches, and okay, so 3 of them are non-resistant. So say you got 4 cockroaches and I come along and spray them with Raid, and 3 of them die because they're not resistant to my bug spray. And now I've got that one left. So that one will find another cockroach and they'll have babies. What they found, though, is those ones that are surviving, that are resistant to bug spray, don't have, what is it called, like the vitality. They stay very small and weak until the gene pool for the non-resistant is actually the stronger one. And then pretty soon, within months, it'll back to be like 90% non-resistant. So then you come along and spray them again. So in other words, there is no change. It's like these resistant ones are just placeholders for that creature until they build up their population again. And that's actually, here I'll show you, that's been found. Mutations must change the DNA of reproductive cells or they cannot be passed on to the young. And mutations are defined as, you're wondering, what is a mutation? It's an error in copying the DNA. And this is from an atheist evolutionary site. So there's an error in copying the DNA, deleting or adding parts, or damage due to chemicals. Not one of those is good, right? Not one of them is a helpful thing that's advancing the species. Here's a guy, he's a scientist, molecular biologist. He said when resistant bacteria, and so he's taken on the bacteria, not the bugs, when resistant bacteria is mixed with non-resistant, the non-resistant will soon dominate. So he's saying that's your typical population, is the ones that are not resistant. Then these organisms, the resistant, are not able to grow with the fidelity and robustness of the original parent non-resistant cells. So again, those ones that hang in there and the other ones are dead. So the antibiotic comes and kills all the non-resistant ones, right? They can't stand up to the antibiotics, but there's still a few that are. Well, it's not becoming a new species like how they present it. It's just that they're kind of the placeholder. And he shows... Nope, he does. I don't have that picture. He shows where he had some bacteria growing these 2 petri dishes, and one was the resistant, so you'd think, oh, they're going to be the robust one. It was the non-resistant. They filled the petri dish, and the ones that resisted were tiny. They never grew. He said, see, so there's a price to pay. They're not, so when you hear that it's resistant, it's not a different species, okay? An evolving sun billions of years ago would have been 20% less bright, causing Earth to be a frozen wasteland. But evidence reveals a watery past with signs of life. It's called the faint young sun paradox, and it was, 1972. Who's the scientist that had a TV show, and he said, I believe in humans, not God. It was very scandalous in the 70s. Oh, I can't believe I've forgotten what his name is. Anyways, he's the one that came up with this. He's like, wait a minute. The sun would have been less bright, so there should not be any evidence of, giant ferns and giant dragonflies. Okay, as Earth systems were created, here's the creation side, man was made upright, able to reason in God's image, and a little lower than the angels. No ooze, no mutant facial legs, no problems. Here's Darwin's Tree of Life. Now we know why he never became an artist. It's a doodle, and it's the only illustration he has in his book. So simple species evolved into more complex species as seen in Darwin's Tree of Life doodle sketch. So I see it looks like little legs on the bottom right, and so then it goes, and anyways, you see, and we're on the frog branch, and that's probably got to be the bee branch at the top. So the problem, okay, here's where they broke down the genes. Nearly 300 researchers working in the US and Europe detailed the exact DNA sequence of 2 out of 5 chromosomes from a mustard plant. Nearly 8,000 genes populate chromosomes 2 and 4 of the wild mustard plant. Worms and flies fall short of matching a plant, gene for gene. So we're told the plants became, they split, and the plants stayed plants, and then one of the branches from the plants became, reptiles, amphibians, monkeys, and people. And here they're saying, oh, that can't be true because the plants have more genes than the insects. So here's mustard plant is more complex than the fly. Rice, a grain of rice has more genes than humans. So did we come from rice? I mean, and you know how you're told, oh, we share 90% of our DNA with chimps, primates? Do you remember that? Okay. Well, they don't tell you, so I think it's 92%, and it's gone down to like 70%. That's been disputed. But even if it's 90%, that's still millions of differences. But let's pretend 90% with chimps. Well, they don't tell you 87% with cows and 80% with mice. I don't hear that. We just stick with what, see, we've already formed us that worldview. We've decided this is what it is, and everything else we just ignore. Yes. Well, actually, it would cut off their funding. Yeah, see, that's the thing. It really does come down to the funding. Yeah, sadly. Yes. Yes. I could quote you. I just received something in the mail this week, And this scientist said, no matter how counterintuitive it is that, in other words, this is not evidence for evolution, we must not let the divine foot in the door. So we have to keep Christianity and God and Creator out of the door. And he's saying, even if it takes saying something is true when it's not, he's admitting this. He's saying to keep the divine foot out of the door. Yes, it's his goal. And so when we learn, right, then what do we do with that knowledge, right? Then we can make a choice. And you're right, I think the devil influences people don't believe that. What I find is people don't research. That's what I find. I find most people don't watch documentaries. Most people aren't going to websites of science. And like I said, I've been doing this for 30 years. It started out with little Kodak carousel slides, and I'm amazed at we just aren't researching. So I don't know, I think when we have kids in school, we hear what they're learning, but when kids are grown and gone, where are we getting our information? Yeah. Yeah. Well, and when you say you're a creationist, they'll say, well, then how do you explain this? And do we have an answer? Yeah, but I find a lot of creationists don't have the answer because we haven't done the research. Last night, I brought an example of creation.com magazine. It's the largest creation magazine in the country, the world, actually. It's, I think it's made in Australia. Every Christian should be getting it. And I hope some of you are, but I don't know. Creation.com. And it's what it is scientists are writing the articles, or it's an interview of a scientist. And I think it's Creation International Ministries. CMI is the one who's producing it. And I'm telling you, it's what you're saying. What's your name? Kelsey. Kelsey, what you're saying, when you get that, now you have the information so that when they say, well, how do you explain this? Because my whole family, they're evolutionists, and they'll say, well, how do you explain this? Well, now I can say, oh, well, did you know? And they're once you show that, you know what, I am doing the research, I found that they'll respect it. Like, oh, okay, you're doing some research. This isn't just your belief. You're actually researching it. It really goes a long way. Because, yeah, I just think that's what I find. Yes. Well, scientific method was invented by a creationist. So was the natural selection. That was Mendel with the peas. Remember, he was the monk that was growing the pea? Yeah, all of modern science was founded by believers. That's why, yeah, we don't have anything to be ashamed of. Yeah, we have got to me, the more powerful evidence and witness. It's just that we just have to look it up and, yeah. And there's some excellent books. When you go to Creation Ministries International, we subscribe to creation.com. It just comes once a quarter. But you can get books, The Icons of Evolution, fascinating. There's scientists that wrote the textbooks of evolution for today's high school books, and now they're creationists. And they've got a chapter in there. So yeah, Icons of Evolution, yeah, there's a lot of good books. If you want to leave your email address with me, I'll send you, stuff, because it takes a lot of reading and watching documentaries, and I'm telling you, we live in a time when we have access to the knowledge of the world. I didn't have access to this when I was growing up. Yeah, this is a good thing. Of course, sometimes it's used for evil. Okay, here's biologist Michael Savanin of UC Davis. He compared 2,000 genes common to humans, frogs, sea urchins, fruit flies, and nematodes. His findings, because you remember, we're on the frog branch. The problem was that different genes told contradictory stories. He said, we've just annihilated the tree of life. You could hear Darwin's tree of life going, timber. He said, we've just annihilated it. And he was in New Scientist magazine. There it is. So creation said, then God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature according to its kind, and God saw that it was good. Now, each was designed for a purpose by the same creator using the same elements, and it's called CHNOPS, so CHNOPS. So carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfate. And that is in the ground. So when you see he made Adam out of the ground, he was using the elements, and he made the same elements. That's another thing. Evolutionists say, well, we're carbon-based life forms. So therefore we must have evolved from each other. No, I think it's because so we could eat, right? We eat the animals, or we have close contact with them. I mean, plus it was the same planet, the same environment. So we made from the same ingredients. So what do today's scientists know about the origin of life? Okay, I love these guys. This is Harvard chemist, so George Whitesides. He received the highest, Priestley medals, the highest award you can get in chemistry. He said, most chemists believe, as do I, that life emerged spontaneously from mixtures of molecules in the prebiotic earth. How? I have no idea. I mean, he's right. We have no idea. Here, this guy is now a Christian. He said the most primitive cells may require at least several hundred different specific biological macromolecules. How such already quite complex structures may have come together remains a mystery to me. He's saying they start out so complex. Where did that come from? Whereas Darwin, remember, he did not have the microscopes we have. He didn't know how complex things were. There's a book called Darwin's Black Box, written by Behe, is his last name, Michael Behe. And he said if Darwin had seen that, his book would have been totally different. But see, now we can see these atoms and viruses and molecules, and so we see how complex they are. Because Darwin said simple to complex. Well, like I said, a grain of rice has more genes than we do. So what, humans to rice? You know, if we follow Darwin's logic. But we can't, because it's all different. And I think God puts those curveballs in there to say, well, they're going to think this is it, but I threw that in there, so that'll stop them. This is a humbling look at the biology of life's origin. He says it has to be true. We really don't have a clue how life originated on Earth by natural means. And he's genetics and biology. And here's Balaam's donkey. Really? Nature hasn't given us the slightest clue about the origin of life? For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen. Here's our beautiful DNA. Being understood by the things that are made, we can understand that there is differences, that a peacock did not become a giraffe. I mean, it's very specific. Even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. We're told to look at his creation and we will see his intellect. I mean, talk about an intellectual. He's the ultimate of the universe. You know, we have no place to be arrogant and I admire intelligence, especially when it's used for good. But we always have to remember, he's the greatest intellect, and he still does everything for us. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Day after day utter speech. I love this. We've been waiting now, it's going up almost 40 years. We've been waiting for this evidence of intelligence out there. But we don't bother looking for intelligence down here. And so if they get some patterned response on these radio what do they call it? Radio telescopes. If we get a response, what are they going to say? You know, because I'm just imagining they're probably going to freak out or whatever. But we have intelligence down here. And to me, if they ask Christians, you know, because they said we should have heard something by now. Just ask us. We tell you, we hear from heaven every day, right? And night after night shows knowledge. Yeah, there's some incredible galaxies up there. This is Moses. Have you not known? Have you not heard? Has it not been told you from the beginning? We have known from the beginning of mankind. It is he, not who, not a what, it's a who, that stretches out the heavens as a curtain. I, the Lord, who makes all things, who stretches out the heavens all alone. There were no other gods. There's no natural random selection and mutated mistakes coming. He did it all by himself, and it was specific, and it was detailed, and it was purposeful. Lift up your eyes on high and behold who has created these things. So here's irreducibly complex organisms. Now here, Charles Darwin says some things. He said if it could be demonstrated that any complex organism existed, which he's basically saying could not have evolved. Because evolution is successive slight modifications. So there's just tiny little changes. Like when I went to the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History in Washington, D.C., you can walk through there, and it shows how they believe reptiles became birds, and it was the feathers coming out of the armpits of the lizard, which would hinder the lizard's ability to move after its own prey, because now it's got these feathers. But anyway, they said it would eventually start climbing trees, and then it would be gliding, and eventually it's flying. Okay, well, we heard, we went to an apologetics group. They flew in a scientist from the UK. He's a bioengineer, and his big thing is birds. He said their engineering is so complex. I mean, the bones have to be hollow, and the muscles, certain muscles have to be different than other parts, and their hearts and lungs are different, and the way the feathers, there's different kind of feathers, and the feathers interlock with these little kind of zipper or hook and latch thing between every feather. He goes, how could that have evolved? Because there's all these tiny details. And so here Charles Darwin is saying, my theory would absolutely break down if you can find something that could not have evolved. He says, but I can find no such case because they didn't have the technology then. So here's Dr. Michael Behe. He revealed the flagellum of these one-celled prokaryotes. Prokaryotes do not have a nucleus, so they believe they were the most primitive of the bacteria. He says this is an example. So in his book, he says that every part of this had to be in place. And this is where their little tail, see that squiggly little tail? Where it connects to the body, and here's a close-up of it. So this is looking through an electron microscope. So look at this, Evolution News and Views. The basis of flagellar assembly is so breathtakingly elegant and mesmerizing that the sheer engineering brilliance. How can you have engineering brilliance without a brilliant engineer, right? So here it is. Let's see if I can get this moving. It is pretty cool. So it's a true nano machine. It's capable of 100,000 RPMs in either direction. It'll stop and then turn around and start spinning right away. So here's another one. It's to me it looks like fudgesicles on some kind of wheel. Oh man, that would be good, right? Fudgesicle right now. So, all right, so look at all the parts. And this is a microscopic thing that you and I don't even see. And this is just the part that attaches its tail to it. That's it. That's the only part. Okay. It requires the expression of more than 60 genes all had to work. It couldn't be 59 genes. It had to be the 60 or it wouldn't work. If it didn't work, that bacteria could not survive. It couldn't move. It would die. And so that was where it's irreducibly complex. In other words, its complexity, it cannot be reduced to smaller parts because evolution is all about smaller parts. Like, well, first it had this one little piece, and then that little piece made another piece. This could not have evolved. So Charles Darwin admitted, if you can find such a thing, organism, then my theory breaks down. So Michael Behe said, found it, and wrote a book about it. So here's the male digger wasp, fly orchid. Okay, so wasp on the left, a fly orchid on the right. They just both happen to live in the same environment, same part of the world. Each flower has an iridescent blue band in the middle, like the iridescence of sunlight on a wasp's wings. Now, a plant cannot see, does not have a brain, and it's made a flower that has the sheen of sunlight on a wasp's wings. How could it have done that? It couldn't, right? A designer had to do that. And it has little antenna. So the reason it does this, so it has the orchid resembles the shape, size, and color of the female wasp, and it actually releases the pheromone of the female digger wasp, telling the males, hey, I'm interested. So how would it know what the pheromone smells like and then duplicate it? The orchid's flower is at the precise angle for pollination. So when the males land on what they think is a female wasp, he's actually pollinating that flower, and it had to be exact angle. The orchid blooms 2 weeks before the flightless females come out from the ground. So it has 2 weeks to be pollinated, and then that's it. Evolution says that species or organisms will take advantage of every possible way to benefit themselves. This thing narrows itself to one pollinator for 2 weeks. That's it. If it's not pollinating those 2 weeks, nothing happens. So with that orchid could become extinct. So talk about anti-evolution. Once the females arrive, the males ignore the orchids because now they've wised up. Oh, we've been tricked. The octopus. Okay, I love this. So the octopus has the same amount of brain neurons as a dog, so it's pretty smart. And 2/3 of those neurons are in its legs. And this is a little baby octopus living in one of our pop cans and touching the human finger. The octopus can match its background accurately and immediately. Its top layer of skin is like a pixelated video screen. So here's the complexity. So on the Darwin's Tree of Life, the octopus would have been at the bottom, towards the bottom. It has tens of thousands of tiny pockets of different colors, opening and closing independently, and incorporates shadows, dappled shimmering of scattered rays, and even lightning. Now, do you think it's actually how it's doing that? In 2018, 33 evolutionary scientists, peer-reviewed, argued that because the octopus is so complex and nothing is like it, Nothing evolved into it. Nothing evolved from it. It must have gotten its genes from an extraterrestrial source. This is 2018, 2 years ago. Peer-reviewed. So their peers said, yeah, makes sense. So aliens came down with genes for the octopus and then apparently left. Wait till they see the octopus. Wait till they see what we left. Okay? So we'd rather believe in aliens than a God who created everything with complexity. See how ridiculous what we do to avoid bringing in the Creator. Keeping the divine foot out. Okay, tell me where the octopus is. This is a camera and a diver. Yeah, you're going to see him appear pretty quick. There he is. He actually looked like the seaweed. They can actually raise their skin into bumps or fringes to look like the seaweed. And now he's going to tell the diver what he thinks of him. There's the ink. And don't ever do that to me again. There he goes. So the second layer consists of reflective cells to create iridescence, while the third layer bounces back incoming light. This is a blue-ringed octopus. I think this one's toxic. If the octopus loses tissues, organs, or an appendage, it will regenerate them to original condition. Humans cannot do that. So now, which is more complex, right? Did we evolve into the octopus because it's way more advanced than us? Or we just have an incredible creator that made so much variety in our creation? Stem cells and blood vessels arrive at the injury site and begin a step-by-step process of repair and regeneration. And of course, we're trying to copy that for people that lose limbs. How could the system develop in anticipation of limb or organ loss, since evolution is blind without foresight? So why would it evolve that if it's blind? It doesn't know I might lose a limb. Let's come up with this. Yeah. See how these all point to Creator. The human eye. Here's Charles Darwin again. To suppose that the eye, with all its inimitable contrivances for adjusting the focus to distances, admitting different amounts of light, correction of spherical chromatic aberration, could have been formed by natural selection, he says, seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest degree. Yeah, Charles Darwin. So I think when you're asking about demonic influence, I think the devil's always trying to get us to think differently, but it's really, what we're feeding ourselves. Pastor Ryan Bell, he went a year without God, and now he's an atheist, and he's head of the largest student alliance in the colleges for kids, or for atheist kids. He's been doing that for years. But he did a year without God. He said, I'm not going to pray, I'm not going to go to church, I'm not going to read my Bible. And he lost his marriage, and he lost his job. I mean, he paid for it. But I'm just saying that it's not... For me, it feels harder to say no to God because I'm made in His image, the Holy Spirit's there. There's times, the Holy Spirit doesn't give you any rest because you're going the wrong way. So to me, it feels like a lot more no, than to just give in. I think it's harder to be lost than saved, is what I'm saying, because that's what I have found. But he went a year, and now, of course, he's just surrounded by people that believe as he, and of course, now he's being fed that. And it's so tragic. Sure. Yeah. Well, I was raised Catholic, and this is Catholic in the 50s and 60s, and they don't believe in reading your Bible. You can only, in fact, it says on the opening page, you shall not read this without the parish priest there to interpret it for you. And that's how my parents were raised, and their parents came from Ireland, so we weren't allowed. The Bible was actually kept in a room we weren't allowed in. I would sneak in there every now and then to see what it was, because, being a kid. So anyways, my parents... We were in California, and they were moving to Vermont. My dad was a Navy officer involved in international weapons, that kind of thing. So we moved around a lot in military family. And anyways, they were moving. I just graduated high school. I was 17, and they said, you're old enough to be on your own. We're moving to Vermont, so you have 2 weeks to get a place to live because we're leaving, and you're staying. And I know it sounds harsh, and that's just kind of how the family dynamic was. So anyways, I ended up going out to the Mojave Desert to find a place to rent, because when you're a kid out of high school, you don't have a high-paying job, and we were living in Woodland Hills, California, and that was a pretty pricey place. So anyways, moved out there, partied all the time, kind of like what Roger was like, but except he had Christian parents. I always tell him, man, you had an example. My dad was an alcoholic, so we all thought, hey, drinking's where it's at, right? So anyways, I was very moved by the hippie movement, and I know some people think it was just about drugs. Well, there was actually, the hippies were also, I was in the group where we were doing fundraising for the civil rights going on in the South. And anything that was, and anti-war for Vietnam War. I mean, anything that I felt was wrong, I was involved in that. And so, anyways, I ended up moving. So we found 10 acres, my husband and I at the time, not this husband. We found 10 acres up in Idaho. And we literally cut down trees and built a cabin. And I lived for 10 years without electricity or running water. So I know what it's like to live off the grid. It's very difficult. You basically trade one dependency for another. So you don't have electricity, but you're using propane or kerosene but anyway, somebody had packed a Bible. It was those green, back in the day, there was green Living Bible. Okay, they packed it in one of our boxes. Now, my husband at the time, he did, I think it was speed, and what was the other thing he was doing? Anyways, doesn't matter. He was, so I'm in this cabin, and I pick up this Bible, and I'm thinking, wow, like I can read this book now, right? I'm not because I left I left my parents' church a long time ago, and honestly, a lot of parents leave their parents' church. And so I opened it up to the first page, and I thought, and as I'm reading Genesis, I'd never heard of this story before. When you're in evolution school, parents, neighbors, that's all you think is out there. And so as I was reading it, I thought, oh my word, so the monkeys at the zoo aren't our relatives. Because that's what my mother said, we're going to go see our relatives when we go to the zoo. And then we'd see the monkeys going, oh my word, they're disgusting. So then when I saw that God created me to be me, that was just huge for me. It's if you're an adult child of an alcoholic parent, there's actually an organization for this group of people. Yeah, and we have some uphill struggles, and so for me to find out that I was created to be me was huge, and I never looked back. So, yeah. Anyways, you bet. So here, Charles Darwin is saying, the human eye, even he doesn't think, and it's got all these subsystems. 40 individual subsystems to work. It handles up to 1.5 million pulse messages per millisecond. We can't even imagine that. Here's form and function. So in the case of the water ouzel, the acutest observer, this is Charles Darwin again, the acutest observer by examining its dead body would never have suspected its subaquatic habits. Now the water ouzel is also called the water dipper, and it does this like little squats on there. Okay, and it goes under the water and it walks against a current that would probably knock us over, and he's just walking along around the bottom. And Charles Darwin is admitting if you found the body of this bird, you would never think it was a water bird, because when we think of water birds, we think of webbed feet, right? So Darwin, he's admitting a creature's remains might not accurately reveal its habits, right? We look at fossils and we think, well, this is probably what they did. Might not be. Its form will not always reveal its function, because this bird's form doesn't reveal its function. That studying fossils might result in assumptions instead of facts. So when diving, this is what happens when diving. Its nasal flaps cover its nostrils, and this all happens in a split second. Its eye lenses change shape to see underwater. Its red blood cells start storing extra oxygen so it can stay submerged. It's now blinking 40 to 50 times per minute, so that's pretty rapid. Its glands are secreting a waxy substance to waterproof its feathers. It walks on the bottom of streams despite fast currents. Its musculature for wings, it moves in a swimming motion. It doesn't do this. And it has down cover. It covers the skin between the feathers. You know, if you've ever had chickens, you can kind of push back their feathers and you see their skin. These you can't. They have double the feathers of other birds. It's the only aquatic songbird, and yet its feet are not webbed. If something was going to evolve into webbed feet, you'd think this would. So here in 1836, I found this in a magazine of natural history. This is the bird that has set the laws of gravity at defiance by breaking through general mandate that things lighter than water shall rise toward its surface and things heavier shall sink beneath it. And it's lighter than water and it goes to the bottom. So here in 1836, whoever wrote J.C. Loudon saying, wow, this is amazing. What's going on with this bird? So these thoughts were out there. The butterfly, this is amazing. So according to the theory of evolution, DNA determines form, period. So the DNA, so there should be 2 different DNAs for caterpillar and butterflies, but they use the same DNA for 2 completely different body plans, different mouths, legs, eyes, stomachs, brain connections, function, and purpose. Completely different, same DNA. And that's what you're talking, it's called epigenetics. We turn on and off genes. We do it with our thoughts, our behavior, environmental stresses, that can turn off and on genes. And you can act a way that you didn't think you could act. Or you could think a way that you hadn't thought you could think. That's that adaptation. God put that in us for us to adapt. And of course, sometimes we do it for the worse, and sometimes we do it for the better. So here's a perfect example of these genes turning off and on. So all the genes for the butterfly's wings and its long legs and how it is, those are turned off when the caterpillar is made. When it turns into soup and then this butterfly starts forming, then the butterfly genes are turned on and the caterpillar genes are turned off. So this is a great example of that. So the mantis shrimp, I love this little guy. He's the size of your little finger. The visual system of the mantis shrimp works more like a satellite sensor. They see color like no other animal on the planet. Again, it's like the octopus. What evolved into it? What evolved from it? Nothing. They are these standalone creatures. They have 16 photoreceptors for color, including UV and polarized light. We have 3. Wow. So did we evolve into mantis shrimps? Because again, simple to complex. Look at that, little Google eyes. The ecological and evolutionary factors that drove the development of such a singularly elaborate UV spectral tuning arrangement are poorly understood, which means we don't know. And this is something this tiny that's just walking along. It'll take on a crab, anything. What they have is this little hammer it's like cocking a gun, I guess. And so when it's released, it goes so fast it actually breaks a water molecule, and it's called cavitation. And you'll see a flash because it's so quick. So it goes after snails, so it'll just do that, and the snail shell just breaks, it just falls apart. But when something tries to get it, because remember, the little guys, they're real feisty, so it showed an octopus, and it's just beating up the octopus, like, and the octopus is, trying to get it to come, to eat it, but man, it's fighting the whole time. So the octopus, he finally ate it, but I'm sure it hurt a little bit. Here's transitional fossils. So this is Charles Darwin. Why, if species descended from all these other species by tiny little steps, where are all those transitional forms, right? So Archaeopteryx, reptile to bird, this was the big one. There's only 7 of them that we found. They found a feather at the dig site, and they said, oh, wow, it's identical to modern birds. Because, okay, so here's its connection. So you see the feathers coming out of its kind of funky claws. It has wing claws, and then has that flat sternum. And the bioengineer that I talked about earlier, he said its bones were not hollow, so it did not fly. So, are there any similarities in birds today? Well, oh my word, there we go. There's teeth in a goose. It says 30 other families of birds have teeth. They call them tomia. They're serrated structures in their mouth. And then here's penguins. They have a variation where they got spines pointing down, so when they swallow a fish, that can't get out of their mouth. And the birds in the ratite family have those flat sternums. There's kiwi, cassowary, I think ostrich. Here's the emu. Whoops, there's the emu. It has wing claw. And then here, Watsons. Watsons were born with wing claws, and evolutionists believed it lived 36 million years ago. It's unlike any other bird. It's in its own family, and guess what? Closely resembles the Archaeopteryx. Well, I'm thinking this is from the it's probably a type of Archaeopteryx. These are the weirdest birds. So they smell like manure, so nobody eats them. They live in, I think it's in the Amazon, and they make a sound like a wheezing smoker. And then when they're threatened, they leave their babies in the nest. So their babies jump into the water. They always have their nests over water. Well, there's crocodiles down there. So the babies jump in to get away from whatever is coming after them in the nest. And then they take their claws and they just start climbing. For hours it takes them to climb up this tree back to the nest, like, finally. And then mom comes back. Okay, you made it. I mean, like the worst parent ever, right? Okay, Confucius ornis. This was, you can tell this was found in China, was found in same strata as the Archaeopteryx, but it's more primitive. It has no teeth. Hundreds of specimens found with feathers from 161 million years ago. Feathers are still, we know those would not have lived that long. Here's Dr. Chatterjee. I love this guy. He's called the fossil whisperer. He can look at a mountainside and go, there's going to be fossils in there. And he found a bird fossil 75 million years older than Archaeopteryx, but more evolved, not less. So here's the conclusion. If his discovery is correct, it shows that the first birds lived at the same time as the dinosaurs. This would require major rewriting of the evolutionary history of birds and dinosaurs alike. That was in 2013. I'm waiting for the rewrite. Right? Aren't we all? Yeah. So here's dinosaurs in decay. So here's T-Rex. Believed to be 20 feet tall, 40 feet long. We do have some complete skeletons of T-Rex. And it lived 65 million years ago, again, theory. But a fossil named B for Bob held a few surprises, and you've probably heard about this one. Stretchy soft tissue in Bob's leg bone proved this T-Rex had not completely decomposed after 65 million years. So here's a red blood cell from Bob. And they name it after the person that discovers the skeleton. So here's Mary Schweitzer. She's a molecular paleontologist, and she's the one that made the discovery. She thought, you know what? I wonder if we just broke a bone, and there was tissue in it. So now they're breaking all sorts of dinosaur bones. She said, finding these tissues in dinosaurs changes the way we think about fossilization. Yeah, it does. We know it's way younger, because our theories of how fossils are preserved do not allow for this. So she's on the right track. This guy, he's considered the dinosaur rock star. So if you've ever wanted to know what a paleontology rock star looks like, there he is. Wears the hat. I guess the t-shirt's cool. Anyways, this is Tom Holtz. He said, Schweitzer's work is showing us we really don't understand decay. Now, when you hear that, normally when there's kids in the audience, I'll ask them, is that true? If I told you, if you took a banana or an apple and you threw it outside, what would happen to it? Rot. So you're a child. You understand decay. He says we really don't understand decay. We're the planet of decay, right? We totally understand. So I disagree with him on that. Then he says there's a lot of basic stuff in nature that people just make assumptions about. We agree that they're making assumptions. This guy is, he was the editor of science for National Geographic, and he wrote a book on human origins. And I wanted to find out how long does it take for DNA to degrade and to where it's not, you can't read it. He said tens of thousands of years old is the longest it could last tissue. And this is saying 65 million years, so there's no way it could have lasted. So we know it's much younger. And so they took the blood sample to see what animal it's most closely related to today, and it's a chicken. So because of this, we now have the new and improved T-Rex. They've now put feathers on it, and they said its little arms are little wings. And so there's a whole hour-long program about the new and improved T-Rex. And it turns out instead of being lone hunters, they've got them in family groups with their little babies, clucking around. And I know, totally different view of T-Rex, right? Yeah, not exactly. Yeah, now it looks like motherly, and it's got little babies, and they're all hanging out. Yeah, very different. I know. So further discoveries. Okay, so in 2006, they found collagen in a mastodon and soft tissue in a woolly mammoth. And of course, they were supposed to be, one was 300,000, the other 600,000 years old. So guess what? What did the mastodon's tissue reveal about its closest relative? Yes. Yeah, I know. Shocking. So here's cholesterol found in a Precambrian fossil from 558 million years ago. They said cholesterol survived. So of course we know it didn't, right? I mean, this is, okay, here's what they think is what is that giant, this isn't the megalodon, this is something else, but they believe it's you can see it's like a crocodile thing. And so they're imagining if we had like a sea world and if we still had dinosaurs, like in other words, these soft tissue, if we could make these creatures and then have everybody come and watch them, and I guess SeaWorld would get more people. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I watched the first 5 minutes and that was it. I never saw the rest. Yeah, I can't watch that kind of stuff because I like animals. I don't want to be, okay. Oh, it's the mosasaur. That's right. This fossil is found with retinal tissue in its eye socket, which typically when it's tissue that's so fragile it doesn't last very long. And they also found hemoglobin in the chest cavity and preserved scales from all parts of its body after 80 million years. No. It's considering its wide range of soft tissue structures, it is unlikely this mosasaur is even thousands of years old. And this is a guy with a PhD in biotechnology and paleobiochemistry. So he has a right to that opinion. He's saying he's not, it's maybe a few thousand. Okay, here's molecular machines within cells. So here's the mitochondria, and they look like the little cocoons. And then we got the nucleus. So we're going to look in there, and you're going to see something very cool. Oh, you know what? Does this, is this mic on? Oh, not, oh, okay. Well, tell you what, I'll do the voiceover. It's very cool. Oh, whoops. Okay, here. Okay. Here. Can you hear it? Put the mic. Can you hear it? If you've ever wanted to invent a perpetual motion machine, guess what? It's already in you. Okay, those are the mitochondria. We're going to go inside of those.
It's been called one of the wonders of the molecular world, an amazing nanoscale machine. ATP synthase is a high-tech micromolecular power generator inside the cells of your body. It generates adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, an energy molecule that provides fuel that every one of your cells needs to function. Without this fuel, your cells will cease operation, and so will you. ATP synthase works like a rotary engine. The barrel-shaped rotator is composed of 10 to 15 protein parts called subunits. The rotator spins around, transmitting mechanical energy into the drive shaft of the machine, which helps make ATP. This drive shaft has a specially placed bump that opens and closes parts as the drive shaft spins around. This bump opens special protein subunits on the bottom of the machine. When the bottom subunits open, a spent energy molecule called adenosine diphosphate, or ADP, enters the machine. The mechanical motion causes the ADP to bind with an additional phosphate group, creating the ATP energy molecule. And the ATP drifts off into the cell, ready to power some biomechanical reaction. The ATP synthase machine has many parts we recognize from human-designed technology. A rotor, a stator, a drive shaft, and other basic components of a rotary engine. The ATP synthase is one of thousands of elegantly designed molecular machines inside your cells that make your life and all known life possible. ATP synthase. An example of intelligent design.
So there you go. I love, if those didn't work, neither would we. So evolution's dilemma is this. DNA is needed to make proteins, but proteins are needed to read DNA. Which came first? See? Without creation. So Richard Dawkins, the machine code of the genes is uncannily computer-like. So Dawkins, as an atheist, is even saying it's like a computer, and Bill Gates is saying DNA is like a computer program, but far, far more advanced than any software. Here's a software engineer. He said it's like we're looking at 8.0 or 9.0 versions of design strategies, like somebody else has been here before. So what did today say scientists think about this? And we already looked at that. So we'll go to the end about how the money, the funding, Darwinism is no longer explaining evolution. That's Dawkins saying evolution. So where can we go for answers? You alone are the Lord. You've made the heavens, the heaven of heavens with all their hosts, the earth and all that is in it, the seas, all that is in them. You give life. He is the source of life. By faith, we understand the universe was formed by God's command. So that what is seen was not made of what's visible. That's their periodic table, the elements. He is before all things. By him all things consist. He holds the bonds of atoms together. He made the laws of the moon and the stars. There's the laws of physics up in the universe. Thus says the Lord, if I have not appointed the ordinances of heaven and earth, there's the laws of nature we're under. This is by him all things were created that are in heaven, visible and invisible. That little creature at the bottom, it's called a water bear. When you're passing a puddle, you're walking down a sidewalk and you're passing a little tiny thing of water on the sidewalk, those are in there. They just eat algae. They've been taken up to space. They don't need air. They can be completely dried out. They can be put in, 500 degree to burn them up, or nothing kills them. It's amazing. Yeah, look up. They're called the tardigrade, but they call them the water bear. And they've got films of them. They've got 6 legs, and they're doing this. That tiny little puddle, and it's like a little ocean to them, and they're just swimming around in it. So we don't even know what's happening all around us, right? It's so amazing. Oh, Lord, how many are your works? Every one of these creatures is tiny. Look at the design and beauty he put in tiny things. The blue sea dragon at the bottom right is 1 inch long. The octopus, 3 inches. The seahorse, 10 inches, and the little blenny is 4 inches. They're all tiny. We'll probably never see them in our lifetime, and look at what he put into them. In wisdom have you made them all. The earth is filled with your riches. Know that the Lord, he is God. It is he who has made us and not we ourselves. Really, that's what evolution is we made ourselves. Natural selection drove this, and we're just this random end game for a bunch of mutations, and yeah. But he made us, not we ourselves. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this reminder and this beautiful lesson about how it is you made us, but you made us each specific. Not even. I mean, every human is different with unique talents and abilities and personalities and even expressions and how we appear. But even the creatures that many of us will never see, there are creatures that have so much to teach us about you, Lord. I mean, we have underestimated your creative ability, I think, or at least I have. And when I study these beautiful creatures, I'm just in awe of you, Lord. You truly are beyond. Your thoughts really aren't our thoughts. And Lord, I just ask that you continue to teach us, to continue to give us information, that we will stand strong in our witness, that we are made in your image, not in our own. In your name, amen.